Hey guys, Dante here, and welcome back to my channel, The Burgle Sort, and welcome back to the segment I like to call the Toy Chest, where I show you a few custom toys I've made in the past and recently, and even, in some cases, how I make them. And this is one of those cases. So, first things first. Do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? Or this? Of course you do. These are Funko Pops of various designs. Now, I'm pointing out these three designs for a particular reason. First, my Batman Beyond. This body type he has is pretty much the original Funko Pop body type. It was a generic body type that they would then paint and slightly alter to fit whatever the character is. But then they kind of expanded beyond that to do different body types altogether, like this Big Steven Universe, or even types such as this Darkwing Duck, where their head is completely different as opposed to just a square head with little details. I love these guys, but they're not the focus today. The focus today is Cammy from Street Fighter and Snow White. And why are they the focus? Because these are the two pops I'm using to create my character, the Clockwork Queen. Or rather, Princess Spring, as she is known. This is a picture I did a while back. You can actually find the link to that in the description. It's a kind of a speed drawing of me coloring that particular picture. But yes, Princess Spring of the Clockwork Queen story is meant to be an original character of mine, and I figured, why not try making a Funko Pop style of her? Something different, something new. So I bought these two because I thought they fit very well for what I needed. I needed Snow White's dress, and her pose is already kind of in the design of the Clockwork Queen. One hand extended outward, one hand extended backward. And Cammy, because she got them legs, she got them thighs. And also because Cammy's eyes are among the few Funko Pops which are actually colored blue, which kind of stood out to me. And her beret was perfect for creating the Clockwork Queen's crown. And also because she had little ears. Now, quick shout out to I Like Comics 2. I Like Comics 2 is a YouTube personality who did a very nice tutorial on how to prep your final pop, how to remove the heads, and ways you could paint them. So I'll skip the details of that, so whoosh! So let's toss up some imagery to show you how I started. First things first, there's this. I removed the head of both figurines, however, as you notice, the plugs on the bottom of the figurines are different. Snow White has a smaller plug, which the entire piece just comes right off. That's ideally what you want. Cammy, however, had a large disc that was softer, so when you pull on her head, just the body came off. Luckily, I made this work, so I boiled everything a second time and separated all the pieces as far as I can. From Cammy's hair, her body, Snow White's body, from her neck joint, and so on. And then from there, I started sculpting. For the sculpting, I do two parts. First things first, I used a soft foam. This is a Crayola like fun foam. It air dries, so it does shrink a little. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. It does shrink a little, but if you're doing large sculpted areas like horns or especially hair in my case, you want to use this as a filler. And then on top of that, you could use an epoxy clay. That way you don't weigh down your sculpture too much with nothing but solid epoxy. The epoxy clay I've used before. This is called Freeform Sculpt. It's from Smooth On. It's two parts, 1 and 2. You mix them together. They're water soluble actually. So you mix these and you use water to prevent it from sticking to your fingers because this become very, very tacky. You have to wet all your tools when sculpting on it. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but I would definitely suggest using this. It's really good for the price. So right here is an image of what I'm talking about. So I cut off Cammy's beret, essentially flipped it upside down to make a kind of bowl, put the bowl in the head, and then sculpted what looks like brain matter, but it's actually meant to be the two arcing curves of what will eventually be her hair. In this piece right here, you can see how I started sculpting on the front of the beret, which I left a bit of a wall, the start of her crown. And on the body down below, you can see I added a bit more detailing with, once again, the leftover sculpting material, because if you have some left over, you want to use it before it dries. Once again, freeform sculpt, great stuff. Gives you about maybe 20 minutes to half an hour of like actual sculpting. Then you have to let it dry for another like 24 hours. And after some sculpting, letting it dry, sculpting again, the final bit is this. So you can see the curve of the hair. So beneath this curve is a thin layer of foam to take up that space, about this much foam. This was also a sheet of foam which I kind of indented. I attach it to the back of her head, let it dry. It does stick a little bit, it did shrink a little bit, but that's no problem. And you go and you just sculpt all over that. Some sanding needs to be done, but frankly I'm very happy with the way this is coming out. I had to add a little bit of the sculpt right here to cover up her scar. I chose Cammy, like I said, because of her eyes, her head structure, and because out of many of the female figureheads, she's one of the few that has ears. Everyone else, their hair is covered. Or rather, their hair is covering the ears, much like on Snow White's original. So right there is our head. Right here is the start of her body. She has her laces on her gauntlet. She has her extra high collar, which I just added on top of Snow White's. And she has extra frills, you know, girly frill on the shoulders. And as you can see, I added more clay to what would be the neck plug, because once again, Cammy's plug is a different size. So I have to make it a little bit larger, so when I finally go to run some hot water over this and plug it in, it will stay nice and tight. As you can see, I've already cut away at the leg to fit Cammy's leg. Ta-da! So I cut off one of Cammy's legs, and so they're sculpting all the details. So you have the little gears, you have the kneecap, the metal plating which makes up the top of her foot, and for the finer details, which are such as a chain which runs down the back of her leg and a piston, I took this wire. Get into focus. So I have 3 chain links, the top of the piston, the wire will be the bottom of the piston, and I'll be essentially putting that right about there on the back of her leg. One thing to note with these Funko Pops, if you're not good at sculpting like me, I'm not a great sculptor. If you notice, the hair is sometimes simplified. It's not really like every single strand is shown. Much like with Snow White, it's just one shape with hints of hair detail. So I kind of mimicked that. Also, small details like gears and pipes and all of that seem to also be simplified on this size. So I decided to keep it simple and more the hint of what it is, as opposed to trying to collect every single detail. But that's what we have so far. All the pieces. Next time we jump to an edit, you're going to see more connected parts and more painted detail. So let's do that right now, shall we? So in order to get the hilt of the sword, the back of it, I need to put a wire straight through. Now the sword already had a wire going through it, which went underneath the fist, but the back end broke off. So I simply took this safety pin, gave it a quick run in a fire. Strange enough, these safety pins go red hot really quick, and just stabbed it right through the hand so it's melted into the hand, so I could just trim it down and sculpt the hilt or the end of the sword right around it. Alright, so here we are with our primed body and primed head. Now everything's evenly coated, so when I go to paint, I won't have to do numerous layers to have the clay, the clay and the plastic match up because they're all one tone. I am going to be using water-based paint. In fact, I'll be using these airbrush paints. I know there are a number of model paints out there, especially water-based paints. However, I am not used to using them. I tend to use enamel paints such as testers enamel paints. However, I'm trying to lean away from them because even though they're nice for larger pieces, smaller pieces like this, you need something thin like water-based paint. So I'm looking for a good brand out there to use, but until now, I'm going to be using these water-based airbrushes. My airbrush, a little container to hold it in, and much like when I do coloring in general, I'm going to work with the lighter colors first, such as the whites and the yellows. That way I don't have to do numerous layers in case I do a darker color first by accident. Of course, you want to have your reference, so boom. And let's get going. So after a few good coats with the watercolor based paints, the airbrush paint that is, I have a nice little layout. However, I'm noticing that this airbrush paint, when scraped against an object like my fingernail, will come off pretty easily. So I'm going to actually thicken it for the larger areas, like all this yellow here, the yellow on the crown, like those are going to be wider big areas, so I'll just use straight up acrylic paint for that. The finer areas, like all the small detailing in her leg, all those mechanical bits, I'll probably still use the more thinner paints. But you want to make sure you use something that's gonna stay. And once again, I'm trying to find just the right kind of water-based paint for this modeling work I'm doing. So practice and experiment, guys. So let's see how this works for her dress and crown. A few coats of acrylic, even mixed with the airbrush paint, seems to be working very well. It's coating the skin tone that's coming off a little hard. Doesn't really show much on the camera, but I'm having to add a lot of layers because this airbrush paint is just super thin, especially for the skin tone. But now we get to a fun part. So I bought both acrylic and airbrush metallic paint some time ago. For the really fine details of her leg and her sword and a part of her wrist, I'm gonna stick with this because it's so thin. It'll probably work best, and then we'll see how well that works. And maybe I'll use the acrylic paint on larger pieces just to have it stick a bit harder. So let's mix that up and start painting that. Okay guys, we are back at the table, so without further ado, let's check out our finished product. Bloop. Bloop. And here we are. My customized Princess Spring, the soon-to-be Clockwork Queen, Funko Pop style. This is something I really want to try out because, as I mentioned earlier, Funko Pop comes in different styles. The original stocky built versus the more stylized bodies that better resemble the characters are. So I figured, I really want to try this out, try my hand at it, see what the problems are as I go along, and I think it came out pretty well. Her head does rotate, of course. It does get slightly hindered by the hilt of her sword, and because she has long flowing hair, which makes it a bit back heavy, which is why it's also good to have this plastic base. Let me just twist that a little bit. There we go. One of the issues I had with this was that the body, as shown in a previous photo, doesn't quite match the base of the head. So I can easily take the head on and off, but it also gives it a bit of a wiggle. Also, to get the detailing behind her back and on the hair, I had to paint everything prior to assembly, which means I could not soak the head in hot water to loosen it up and reapply it to the body without stripping all the paint off. But like I said, the head is easy to come off. You can see all the detailing I did underneath the backside of the hair. And here's the detailing on the back of her dress. She has her red sash that goes all around her waist, her high royal collar. If I take her off the base right now, I actually drilled a hole in her foot because originally Snow White's body does not have a base. This big dress kind of, you know, makes her stand well, but she needs it now. Let me see, get some details. There we go. We have all the little orangey bronze gears that make up the joints of her body, behind her knee, at her ankle, her toes. You have the little control panel that her leg always has. A little hole right there is where she puts this heart-shaped wind-up key. She has a white strap, a white lace, kind of tied off on her gauntlet or her glove with her 2 silver fingertips. Her sword, silver, orangey bronze. Her tattered sleeve with her, you know, her skin showing beneath that. A ring of pearls, or a necklace of pearls, or I don't know, string of pearls if you wish, to hold on to her wind-up key. White inner dress, beneath, of course, the tattered yellow gown. She has her royal crown with her jewelry, the light blue jewelry to match her eye, which was quite a pain to get that circle as close as possible to repaint it. Her eye patch and her scar. And there we go. I plan to start making a series in which I make figurines, not Funko Pop, more of the 5 to 6 inch style action figures based on certain YouTube personalities or even characters based on those personalities, like Louis Lovehog of Atop the Fourth Wall, his character Linkara. Other characters such as the main character of Robo Buddies, the hostess herself. Just certain characters who I think really stand out. So I'm going to see if I can start devoting making customized pieces of them. I might return to the Funko Pop style, not too sure. The issue with the style is, well, matching the style. I had a lot of issue wondering how I was going to handle her high collar given the giant head she has. So I figured, you know, keep the collar in tone with the anatomy, or rather the proportions of the body, and keep the head big by itself. This was a fun experience and I enjoyed it. And once again, guys, I am Dante. Like, favorite, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the future. Later.